What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible.
It is true. I pledged the entirety.
But you didn't donate it.
You know who the true star of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial was? She was not a movie star, that's for sure. Her name was Camille Vasquez, and she blew everybody out of the water. I was so impressed by her. Every time YouTube put up a new video of how she demolished and destroyed Amber Heard, I went to go watch it. Now, I didn't watch the whole trial because, you know, working mom, attorney, I just didn't have the time. But the times that I did see her, I was blown away. I mean, it just made me so proud to be an attorney like Camille. Hi, I'm Tyler, the Hollywood attorney. Today, I wanted to break down the difference between a litigator and a transactional attorney, and I thought I would use our favorite lawyer out there right now, Camille Vasquez. Let's start with the 3 similarities between Camille and me. Number 1, we are both attorneys in Hollywood. Number 2, we are women attorneys of color, which there's still not enough of us. And 3, and this is the part that people might not realize, but when you are a good litigator, that also means you are a good storyteller. And it's always been my dream to be a storyteller, and I try to do it within my work, and now with my YouTube channel, this is how I'm telling my stories. So those are the 3 similarities between us. But let's talk about the differences. What a litigator does for work and what a transactional attorney does for work are 2 different things. I think in law school, they never tell you what it's actually like to be a litigator day in and day out, and they don't actually explain what it's like to be a transactional attorney day in and day out. So after law school, I went into litigation, just straight business litigation. It wasn't anything super exciting. But you know what it means to be a litigator when you're a baby attorney? You basically cut and paste the same discovery over and over with canned responses as to why you cannot respond to the discovery request. And 2, you go to settlements. You might get your client a $10,000 settlement. Then you go back to the office, you write them a letter, and you never hear from anybody ever again. And 2 years of that was soul killing because I didn't think I was making a difference in anybody's life and nobody really cared. So when I was approaching my 2-year mark as a litigator, I decided that I needed to get out. So I decided that I wanted to get into entertainment law because I had gone to undergrad as an English major. I've always loved being creative and being around creatives. I've had friends who would come to me with a screenplay agreement asking me to look it over, and I just thought it was really powerful and impactful to represent and protect the creatives, right? So I decided I'm going to get into entertainment. I'm going to go into Hollywood. Well, you know what? That door was not going to open anytime soon because it was about 100 feet tall and weighed about 2 tons, and there was no way I can open that door because you know why? It's the biggest catch-22 in the world. No one will give you the chance to get the experience you need to be an entertainment attorney, but nobody wants to train you. So I was thinking, do you come out of the womb with experience? You know, I think typically you have to graduate from like Harvard or Yale to be able to get into entertainment law right away, and I did not. So my husband, who is an architect, won his firm the CAA building, which I call the Death Star, and so he was able to connect me with an agent there who was like the only agent in the world that represents all the Black Cape architects. So I met with her and she was very, very sweet, and she got me a position to sit at an agent's desk because they didn't have any openings in the BA department at the time. And at the same time, I found an opening, I think it was like in Craigslist, where a solo practitioner had a small firm on the boardwalk of Venice, and he needed someone to come in and replace his only associate who was going off, getting married, and would be leaving his firm. So I went to a talent attorney that I met at a Loyola mock trial, right? I was trying to go to all these events to try to meet entertainment attorneys, and Loyola, which has a big entertainment law group, which is so ironic because I never took one entertainment law class there. So that just tells you, if you want to do something other than what you studied in law school or even undergrad, you could totally do it, because I didn't study any entertainment law classes because I thought I was going to be a litigator. So I went to a mock negotiation that Loyola had set up between a talent attorney and a studio attorney, and I met this talent lawyer there. So I asked this talent attorney, who one time represented like the biggest star on TV, the highest paying actress, so he knows what he's talking about, and he said, well, I think you should go to law firm because that's where you'll get legal experience. Now CAA might seem more prestigious, but actually the attorney that I went to go work for was also very established, had been head of business affairs at a big production company, and so that's what I did. And you know what? I went from making 6 figures as a litigator to getting paid nothing for the first, I think, 6 months, and that was an interesting transition. And then after that, I got basically paid an assistant salary. I mean, probably even lower than assistant salary. And I committed to that. You know what? This is going to be an investment in my future at that time. So I was able to make that transition, but it took a lot of sacrifice. And after making that transition, I realized the difference between a litigator and a transactional attorney. And this is how I think of being a litigator. When you're a litigator, you are involved in a divorce proceeding every single day. You are trying to separate separate, right, and attack, and you are literally trying to show how awful and evil the other side is or a certain person is. Whereas when you're a transactional attorney, it's like courtship, right? Every day you're in a courtship because both sides have a common goal that they're trying to get to, right? Let's take for an example, when I negotiate an actor deal, right? We both want this actor to do the role, right? So we both want him to get to this finish line of agreeing to the terms and signing the agreement so that he or she can start their services on camera, because typically you can't start shooting until an agreement is signed, and that definitely was the policy when it was at Disney. So I realized that after leaving litigation that I didn't want to be in a divorce all day long. I'm actually not very adversarial, and I don't like having to point out why the other person is awful or evil or has committed a crime. So I'm so grateful that I was able to make that change from litigation to transactional law. But it's actually not that easy of a change. I mean, most of the time, once you decide to be a litigator, you usually stay a litigator. I think it's very helpful for law students to kind of understand the difference between litigation and transactional work, because I don't think in law school they really describe that. So let's talk a little bit about how you are a transactional attorney in Hollywood. Under transactional law within Hollywood, you can be in-house or you can be at a firm. We're gonna stick to in-house for a second because that's what I'm doing right now. And within in-house, you can be a business affairs executive or a legal affairs attorney, right? And those two groups of attorneys are very different at a big studio than when you're at a smaller company, right? So when I was at Disney, I was in their live action features group, and I was part of the legal affairs group. And we were the production attorneys that basically papered all the deals. And we had 3 business affairs executives, and all they did was make the deals. So let's say they needed to make a deal for, let's say, Tom Hanks, right? Well, first they would send the script, right? They would send the script to Tom Hanks's agent or manager, or even attorney sometimes if they don't have an agent or manager. So they would send them the script, and then if he was interested, then the business affairs executive would start making the deal for his acting services, right? So they would usually talk about his compensation, his credit, scheduling probably when he's available. I mean, they usually tackle the kind of very high level deal terms, and then within compensation, there's the fixed comp, which is what they get up front, and then the contingent comp, which is the back end, which is, you know, if the film ends up being successful. And then after those terms are negotiated through, they send something at Disney, it's called an IHC, which is I have concluded. So that gets sent to the legal affairs attorneys, and I was part of that group. We had about, at the time, 7 to 8 attorneys, and each legal affairs attorney would get assigned 1 go film. So my 2 go films when I was at Disney was Saving Mr. Banks, that was my first film, and my second film was Cinderella. And I had, you know, many films in development. And at that point, then the terms get sent to us, we draft the agreements, and it's not like then it's done, right? Because we have to negotiate through these forms with their attorney, and, you know, things like their perk package. I always joke that I am an overqualified travel agent because it always ends up that we are arguing about what class of air travel, what the trailer looks like, and what their hotel accommodations are, right? Sometimes, you know, it's an apartment, sometimes it's a hotel or a suite at a hotel, and that might take months. I mean, if it's a very big star, it could take 3 to 6 months for me to negotiate through and draft and redraft. And, you know, after I draft it, then it comes back to us, and, you know, we could have 5, 6, 7, 8 drafts by the time we're complete with having the actor deal done. Now, I talk about Tom Hanks because he actually was one of the stars of Saving Mr. Banks. He played Walt Disney. And I remember when I was trying to get the first actor signed before principal photography started, because basically if we don't have whoever's going to be in front of the camera or behind the camera, like the director, if their agreements aren't signed at Disney, that means that camera can't start rolling because the IP isn't technically assigned to us, right? We don't own the work for hire. So that better not happen, because if it does, that means the whole crew and cast are basically standing around because I couldn't do my job properly. And each day that a crew stood around meant like $100,000 would be wasted. Talk about pressure, huh? So let's say that was incredibly stressful, you know, also exciting, right? Because I was, you know, I was the head attorney for a Walt Disney film. And I will tell you that when I got that job, that was my dream job for a while until it wasn't. But that's a story for another time. So that's basically a short, tiny slice of my career. I mean, my career is long and windy, and some would say super interesting. Some would say kind of weird, because after Disney, I ended up going to a big law firm, and usually you don't do that. I mean, the only way to get into a big law firm is if you're the top 10% at law school, and I definitely wasn't that. So here's one of my stories. And just like Camille Vasquez, I mean, if you watched her at the closing arguments where she's telling a story, I mean, she weaves and she drops, you know, a fact here about Amber being abusive and then how Johnny put up with her. And I mean, it was just so masterfully done. If you haven't watched her closing arguments, you should go watch it, because ultimately that is what makes a litigator a good one. Now, you have to be a great litigator and know the laws and know the codes, and you also have to really connect with people, right? You have to connect with the jury. And I think actually that's what I love most about my job as a transactional attorney, especially now as business affairs, making the deals, right? And so one of the ways that I am similar with Camille and with litigators is you have to be able to connect to the jury, right? You have to tell a story. You have to show that your clients are real people. And honestly, my favorite part of my job is being able to connect to people, right? And I think something that, you know, other attorneys have told me that they like working with me is because I really care about making sure that both sides leave the deal conclusion slightly unhappy, because that means that both sides got what they wanted, right? Because if you have one side that leaves incredibly happy, then that means the other side got screwed, right? So I always ask the other side, when I'm making an actor deal or director deal or writer deal, I always ask him, what's important to your client? Just tell me, and I will make sure that thing or those few things that are utmost priority to them will get taken care of, right? So for one of my films, you know, the director said, I don't care if I fly first class or business class or coach, just give me my budget so that I can do the most incredible, not yet viable technology out there. And that was very helpful. So I said, okay, I could go to the actors and say, I can't give you your normal perk package because I need to save it for the director who needs it for his budget for the technology. And that's very helpful, right? So I always try to understand what's important to the other side. And maybe that was not present with litigation. And so I wasn't able to have that kind of human factor in there, right? Maybe if I stayed in litigation longer, you know, I could have gotten to a higher level where I could go to trial. But you know what? I also realized after being a litigator and going to court and asking for a motion to dismiss or filing a motion that I really didn't like to be in court. Like that was not appealing to me at all. Going to court is so boring because most time you're just sitting around to be called, and then usually you're asking for a continuance, and it's actually not that glamorous at all. That was me pulling back the veil a little bit on what it's like to be a litigator in Hollywood versus a transactional attorney. I'm so excited because this is so fun for me to tell my story finally. You know, I went to Berkeley to be an English major. It was my dream to be a novelist, but I had to be practical. You know, as an immigrant, I had to take care of my parents. So I went to law school, and I love my job now. I love being an attorney, but I always wanted to be a novelist, and I never put that dream away. So now, you know, 20 years later, I'm taking that dream off the shelf. You know, there's a great scene in Their Eyes Are Watching God. What a beautiful book about a woman's journey. I think she's married off very young, and it said she stood there until something fell off the shelf inside her. And I think this is when Jody slaps her. And it's so interesting, right? Our memories as children, because I think I read this in high school and I just vividly remember the scene of the jar inside her. And I interpreted it as, perhaps at the time, you know, that was my artistic license. I had always envisioned that I took my dream of being a novelist and I put it into a glass jar and I put it up on the shelf. I didn't smash the jar. I just kept it up on the shelf with the hope that one day I would come back to it. And now 20 years later, I have, and I'm so grateful that you're here to be part of my journey with me. So I will see you next time. Bye. If you liked that video, make sure to catch the time when I went to New York City to be on set of my latest Sean Penn movie, and I got to take my daughter. It was super cool. But was it really as perfect and as glamorous as you think it might be? You'll have to watch the video to find out. This is Tyler. Remember, you're one thought away from joy.